They want me to roll it slow, roll it slow. Oh, oh.
50 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning in Port of Spain, and you're listening to Saucy Wow. They want me to roll it slow. Well, not me, but you know, she wants you to roll it slow. 12 days to go before the big Carnival Monday and Tuesday. But before we get into our Carnival segment this morning, let's talk a bit about the Tobago elections, the THA elections, and we have none other than our trusted advisor and analyst, attorney at law, Martin George. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Hayden, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming in. Very simply, why did the TUP lose this election so badly?
It appears to be a misreading of the population, misreading of the voters, and I guess missing the signs and signals that they were possibly sending along the way. And it would seem also that persons felt that there was not enough independence shown by the TUP leader in terms of some of his positions standing up for Tobago. And trust me, for Tobagonians, that means a lot. So it doesn't matter that, okay, you may be in partnership with, other parties in the government, but when it comes to issues for Tobago, they need to see their leader as standing up strong. And, in a way, it may be that those were some of the things that could have been done differently.
But I mean, Mr. Ashworth, Jack and his team, they are Tobagonians. They live in Tobago. Mm-hmm. They understand the culture of Tobago. How could they misread this thing so badly? Well, were they misguided?
Well, now the thing is, I don't know who were the election strategists that they used or the campaign managers that they employed for this purpose. But the point is, as I indicated to someone, it may be that if you import a style or system of electoral campaigning which does not fit the matrix for Tobago, you can end up with problems or difficulties, and it may be that you can choose to, if you use the analogy of the American chain store, Ross Dress for Less,
right.
You could choose to go with Ross at a higher cost, or you may be able to dress for less and get better results.
Right.
And I think that's the fundamental issue there, in terms of the way the campaign was, marketed, promoted. It appeared to be a transplanting of something that really didn't appear to meet the needs or the receptiveness of Tobagonians.
Yes. Where does the TUP now go from here? Can Mr. Ashworth, Jack, hold on to the leadership of that party?
Well, I've seen statements from the party where they've indicated that they are in discussions with various arms of the party. The difficulty would be, regardless of what the party thinks, feels, or decides, the nation, I think, may really be the final arbiter on that issue. In other words, even though your party may say, well, look, I wish to endorse you to stay on as leader, the point is, nationally, when you look at what has happened, it becomes a very tenuous position to be able to hold on to the post of political leader, particularly from the area of credibility. Because in other words, they want to see a leader as someone who can lead you into battle and be successful at the end of the day. So I think there would be some need for, retooling, reshaping, rethinking the vision, and then maybe come again. But I think is going to be particularly difficult to gain that national trust, that national respect, just by a simple continuation and saying, well, look, let's pretend as if nothing went wrong here. I really don't think that would wash with anyone. And I think additionally, there are quite a few golden opportunities that he has now. And I urge him to probably come out and make statements now, because it would begin to, I think, in the minds of the public of Tobago, show that, look, you are now standing up again for things Tobago. There have been some, I think, rather outlandish statements I've heard. I have seen something from Mr. Sat Miraj that I consider quite appalling, that, someone is calling for a boycott of Tobago Tobago and telling persons, don't put your money there, don't go there for holidays, go up the islands. So this, I think, would be a golden opportunity for Mr. Ashworth Jack to show Tobagonians, look, hey, I'm standing up for you. I'm going to make a statement condemning those calls. You know, I think also in terms of the issue of whether race was the deciding factor, I think the Prime Minister stood up brilliantly and made a very strong, clear, definitive statement on that issue. And I think it was also a fantastic opportunity for Mr. Jack to stand up also and come out and say to Tobagonians, hey, listen, I am not buying into this, nonsense about race was the deciding factor. I stand here and I'm telling you that I don't think it was so. So I think those are two fantastic opportunities that he had, and I guess possibly still has.
But this is not in keeping. This is not in keeping with his modus operandi, and he has not been known to stand up on these issues unless he has the full support of the PP government behind him.
Well, and this, I think, has been part of the reason for the demise. So, in other words, if you want, I mean, they always said madness is continuing to do the same things over and over again and expecting different results. So, if that's what you've been doing, and you see the result that you've gotten, then clearly you need to break the mold. Right. You need to free yourself from those shackles and come with something different that can show Tobagonians that, look, hey, I am standing up for my people.
Is it possible that the only way for the TOP to regain some amount of credibility amongst the Tobagonian electorate is that they may actually have to withdraw from the partnership?
It may not at all be anything so drastic or draconian. You may not need to take such drastic steps, but you need to be able to show, and let me tell you, a lot of it comes down to the leader. You need a leader who is young, bright, articulate, intelligent, who can show that strength of character, that strength of purpose, that resolve to be able to say, well, hey, listen, even though I'm in partnership with the government, okay, on certain issues when it comes to Tobago, let me speak. Let me be the person to take the lead. I will take the advice from my partners in government. I will listen to them, but let us ensure that Tobagonians see me as leading on these issues. And I think there wasn't enough of that. And I guess maybe even on the campaign trail, the way it played itself out, maybe there was not enough of Mr. Jack taking that lead. And it almost looked as if, well, he might have been a sideshow as part of, an imported campaign from Trinidad.
Yes. When you take a step back and look at the entire scenario, I mean, from the time the bell was rung for the THA election, this particular THA election, 2013, took on an entire
it was like a general election. It was like a general election.
Indeed, yes. It was. Why did this particular THA election emerge as such an intense and hotly contested assembly election?
I think it's clearly because of the two upcoming elections, the local government elections, the general elections in 2015. The two Tobago seats could be pivotal in 2015. So I think both parties, both major parties, have recognized this, and they are starting from now to lay the groundwork. So in other words, they both saw a win in the THA elections as a precursor to possibly winning those two seats.
Right.
Because if you have anything that is close in Trinidad, those two seats could be, everybody would like to know you have two safe seats for sure, Right. So I think that's one thing that they all are looking at. Then you also look at it in the sense that it was seen in a way as a referendum on the government's performance, because for whatever reason, the government pitted itself so fully into this election. So in other words, it was almost as if, well, it was not just a vote for the TOP, but an endorsement or, a vote of approval for the government.
Right.
And the thing is now, that is great if it works with a win. If it doesn't, then it becomes a two-edged sword, and you are cut by your own blade.
But did the government unwittingly turn it into a referendum on its performance?
Well, I think that is exactly what happened at the end of the day, because of the heavy involvement, because you had lots of ministers going across. So I think at the end of the day, that's what happened. So in hindsight, of course, everyone has 20/20 vision, and there are things that I guess everyone would have done differently had they known the way things would play out. But the point is that as it went, I think the population saw it as that. And because of the heavy involvement of the government in the elections, it was almost as if, well, look, this is our partner, vote for us.
Yes. Well, let's talk about the way forward for the THA under the current circumstances and shift our focus to the whole question of governance. Now, all 12 assembly seats have been won by the PNM. So essentially, there is no minority leader in the THA. Now, the question is therefore this. In the context of good governance, shouldn't there be an opposing voice in the assembly for the sake of the strength of the democracy?
Well, I mean, that question, I mean, it answers itself. I think everybody would agree. I think Mr. London and all has recognized that, you know, without that check and balance, you know, it is not a good thing. But of course, it's not anybody's fault that it worked out this way. So what we need is for the population to be particularly vigilant in terms of the PNM and their performance, because they have no excuses now. You have all 12 seats, you have all of Tobago to deal with, to manage, to control. You know, everybody has given you this endorsement, so therefore you have to really make it work. And I'll tell you this. You get the sense that while it would be an endorsement in terms of the victory, it does not mean that Tobagonians in general are satisfied with the level of performance and delivery by the PNM. In fact, Mr. London himself has confessed that they could have done more, you know. So let's not take this 12-0 and make it into something that it's not. While it is a victory, it is not something that the PNM must sit down and say, well, yes, you know, we have it comfortably made for the next 4 years. Because I tell you, the very people who voted them in are the very people who, if they are dissatisfied in 4 years, will vote them out.
Yes.
That's the way Tobagonians are. If they measure you, and if they don't feel satisfied for one reason or another, they are quite happy to say, well, look, next.
Right, but they have to wait another 4 years.
Well, that's the
there is no opportunity to recall anybody.
That's the point.
Of course.
That's the point.
How does this election now and the results therefrom, how does this now affect or change the relationship between a PNM-controlled THA and the central government going forward?
Well, the thing is, I'm not sure it's going to change very much, because it's not been the smoothest ride in the past in terms of the relationship. Of course, I think there would be some attempt to have it, you know, to placate things and to, you know, have it pacified going forward. But at the end of the day, the politics is the fundamental underpinning of the relationship, and that is going to create difficulties along the way. So I think it's going to be maybe with a little more finesse and, you know, in a more genteel manner, but the animosities will continue. I can't see it any other way.
But who has to extend the olive branch?
Well,
who has to be the statesman or stateswoman, as the case may be in this case?
No, you see, it's not just the question of an olive branch, unfortunately. I think you need a whole olive tree in this circumstance. No, I'll tell you why. Because, you see, no matter what, there's always the issue of trying to take credit. So, in other words, one party will say, well, look, we started this project, but the other party finished it. So the other party who finishes it will say, well, look, it's our project, and look, we are opening this facility. Yes. And we've seen lots of these things occur in the past. You know, unseemly jousting between ministers from central government and members of the THA over the opening of this building, and who is not giving keys to this one, and who is not sending invitation. I mean, it's really, really pathetic when one considers that this is what passes for governance.
Exactly. And you know what's even more vexing about it is that these are basic amenities being provided to the electorate.
That's right. Which is being done with the taxpayers' money.
Exactly. This is nothing
transformational. So it's not a favor, it's not a gift.
There is nothing transformational taking place here. These are all basic amenities.
That's right.
A gas station.
That's right.
A hospital.
That's right.
An office building.
Yes.
A bridge, a road. These are all basic amenities that our politicians seem to...
And they've been fighting over those little issues. So the point is, as I say, I can't really see that there's going to be any, dramatic change or any quantum leap in improvement in the relation. As I say, it may be handled with a little more delicacy, tact, and finesse, but the animosities will continue.
But in essence, this country has now been placed in full election mode for the next 2 years. Did we
quite right.
ever leave the election mode since 2010?
Well, actually, I think that's the issue. I think it's really been basically a long season of election campaigning, basically, from 2010, and it's going to run us straight into 2015.
But who is taking care of the people's business while everybody is running around on a soapbox campaigning?
I think these are questions which need to be answered seriously, because when one looks at it, you can't simply run a government by campaigning from one election to another. It's just not practical. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere in the world that people do that. So in other words, we need to begin to ask the hard and serious questions. Okay, what are we doing in terms of our basic systems of governance, or basic necessities for running the country? You look at, I mean, there's some, fundamental indicia that you look at. You look at, okay, what is our GDP? What is it? Those are the things you look at when you're talking about running a country.
Yes.
You look at your provisions of goods and services, the provision of basic health care, education for your citizens. Now, the point is, while that might be done at the micro level, the point is you must have a macro vision where the government is saying, hey, listen, this is our vision for the future. This is where we are taking this nation. When you think of places like Singapore and Malaysia, it's because the leaders, the governments had visions, and they said, hey, listen, over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this is our plan, this is where we want to go, and this is our macro vision. Because if you only have a 5-year plan from one election to the next, and your only intention is, look, let's do what is necessary to win the next election, to stay for another 5 years, then really and truly the country is going to be stymied.
Yes.
The economy will not develop, because you can't have any long-term plans. You can't make any sacrifices now to say, well, okay, look, in 5, 10 years this is going to pay off, because you don't want to wait for that. You want the immediate glitzy glamour to say, well, look, I've done this magic. But the point is, when you look beyond it, you realize it's just smoke and mirrors.
Yes. But is this not, this perpetual election mode in which we have found ourselves, is this not the natural outcome of a coalition government that is working hard to keep itself together and to remain relevant to the electorate? Not necessarily,
because if you look at other coalition governments, how they function, I mean, in the UK, once the election is over, they get down to the serious business of work. Now, while you may have within the coalition partners, you may have disagreements or differences, but that's internal. No one lets the business of governance or running the country suffer as a result. Look at the situation in Germany, right, with Merkel. She has to, work with other parties in order to make things run. So as I say, they may not always agree. The Christian Democrats and the other parties, they may not always agree, but at the end of the day, they take responsibility for running the country. And I think that's the difficulty we have here. We've not seen enough of that occurring.
So essentially, we are going to be stuck in this election mode for the next 2 years. The local government election is going to be most likely the Trinidad version of a referendum on the PP government.
Yes.
And then the Prime Minister's take away from all of this now will be to simply survive until the elections are due? Is that what we're heading into?
Well, unfortunately, the roadmap seems to point in that direction, and I think it would take tremendous strength of character from the government to pull itself up by its bootstraps and say, hey, listen, we want to do more for the people than just, campaigning to win another election.
Yes.
Of course, but as I say, that requires self-sacrifice, discipline, and I'm not sure that given the history of Trinidad and Tobago and the history of our politicians in general, that persons are really prepared to make that kind of sacrifice.
Well,
the easiest thing, the quickest thing is you offer the make work programs, you offer more CPEP, more URP, you condemn it when you're in opposition.
Yes,
but once you get into government, it's the best thing,
Yes.
You hand out this, you hand out that, and you try to rally rally the troops and you say, listen, man, come on. If you don't vote for me, you're putting this at risk. So,
Exactly.
And unfortunately, these are the things which have destroyed the fabric of the society, because when you have scenarios where persons get the feeling that, look, I can get paid for not working or not working properly or not, then you are creating generations and generations of persons who really provide very little productive value to the society.
Yes. Now, the issue then becomes one of the power of the actual voter.
Yes.
And so let us look at constitutional reform in its broadest sense. The right to recall, fixed dates for elections, limited terms for the Prime Minister, the reform of the public service, and the need to create a public service that is more performance-driven and rewarded in that regard. Why has it taken us so long to get to the point where we can actually institute these particular changes to our constitution?
Because at the end of the day, the political will is what is required. The political will is always very strong when you're in opposition, because when you're in opposition, you look at this as a way to get yourself back possibly in the seat of power. When you're in the seat of power, you look at the opposition persons and you said, hell no. It was good then when I was there, but now I'm here, it's not good again. And that has always been the difficulty. So because it would always require that, consensuality.
Yes.
And the majority of the votes in the House will have to be cast in favor of any of these changes to get the agreements. I think that's the most difficult thing. Unless there is significant public pressure, and you have, activists and pressure groups, bringing the pressure on both sides of the House, both government and opposition, and saying, hey, listen, we want this, we want these things done. And you keep up that pressure, because you need to keep it up in order to really get it through, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Well, I dare say, sir, that is exactly where we are as a people. That is exactly what we need. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
So early in the
It's been a
morning.
pleasure, yes.
Have a wonderful day. We'll talk about this stuff a little more in the future.
Yes, thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have other members of the judiciary, may I say, to talk about some important developments taking place within that arm of our government. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Take me down, holy bumper, and take me down, take me down, take me down, grab me bum.